Hello everyone and welcome to Sci-Fi Zone, where we celebrate science fiction movies and TV shows from the past, the present and the future. Today I've got Claire and NPS with me and we're coming to you from the wonderful store of Alternate Worlds. It's a great place to go to if you haven't been already. One of the big things that's going on around the place at the moment is the fact that they're trying to make a TV series or a new series out of the book's Foundation. Now I know NPS doesn't know much about Foundation because it's a very old story from Isaac Asimov, but Claire, you certainly do.
Well, I've read all the books. It's been a while, but I have read all the books. It's going to be really interesting to see how they do this because it's a long story.
Thousands of years.
And it's not so character driven. It's more about sort of the civilization. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they do. I don't know where they'll start.
I don't know either. And of course it'll need a cast of thousands because the time jumps between these different eras. I mean, as far as I'm aware, they're just looking at doing the first book, but whoever gets to play Hari Seldon, we're looking at an image of Hari Seldon right there. He's the big cheese in the thing. And if you ever read the book, you think, oh, this guy is the dude for the entire thing. And then he just disappears because he's just dies when they jump to the next 1,000 years later or whatever it happens to be. So. I don't know. What do you think?
I really, on this one, I don't know. I don't know where they're going to start. I don't know what they're going to do. If they do the first book, it'll be interesting. But that's such a small part of the story.
One of the things that happens in Foundation, of course this was written back in the 60s, is they want to write a book called the Encyclopedia Galactica. That is Wikipedia. We have that already. And how do I find that information? I actually read it on Wikipedia. How good is that? So there you go. It's very, very exciting stuff. But as to how they're going to do it is anybody's guess. One of the funkier things, if you're a Star Wars fan, is the planet Trantor was the inspiration for Coruscant, an entire planet that is dominated by one city, which is kind of groovy. So if Foundation does get made and you see this planet that's one city and you go, they've copied that from Star Wars, actually they didn't. So how good is that? So while we think about what's going to happen with Foundation, when they're going to make it and how it is all going to look, rack your brain around it, read the books, they're from a long time ago, but still worth having a good look at. In the interim, we'll be back after these messages. Speak soon.
Alternate Worlds has been specialising in comics and collectibles for over 40 years, with a back issue collection of over 500,000 comics covering the golden age right through to latest releases, including signed and slabbed gems. They also have an enormous graphic novel collection, one of the largest ranges of manga in the country, as well as toys, statues and pops, and new items are arriving every Wednesday. Each month, Alternate Worlds hosts its own premium comic day, where all the rare treasures are put on display for inspection and purchase. The store also runs regular tournaments and competitions for both comic and gaming fans. And for local and interstate and international buyers, the Alternate Worlds website features their complete range of products. So whether you come in online or in store, visit them soon.
And welcome back. This is a very special segment for us for a couple of different reasons and very interesting stuff to talk about as well. And for that reason, I'm going to pass over to Claire, who's going to talk about the women of Battlestar Galactica. Claire, what have you got for us?
Well, we all know I love a good kick-ass woman.
Oh, there should be a drinking game for that. You never know.
Yes. So Battlestar Galactica was one of the first remake shows that exchanged characters for women.
Yep.
So Starbuck, as a prime example, in the original series was a guy, and in the new series was a woman. And they changed Boomer as well.
Yep.
And we also had a female president.
Yes.
And the main Cylon, the one that we saw the most of, that we sort of interacted with the most, was also female. So I'm going to say it again, I love this. I love the fact that they switched them out and that they used women. To begin with, I've got to admit, I was really unsure, particularly with Starbuck, because it was quite a particular character. And to switch that around, I don't know, I wasn't sure in the beginning whether it was going to work or not. But I think it really did. I think it really went well. And Katie Sackhoff did an amazing job with it. And of course, Tricia Helfer as number 6 was just brilliant. Just all the different aspects of the character, all the different, and the different versions as well, made it really interesting. It would have been a difficult part to play, I think.
I think what's intriguing is that, especially when you compare it to the original series of Battlestar in the 70s, where the women were pretty much subservient in a lot of ways to the guys, which was a bit unfortunate. So with the new series, they can just completely rearrange it all and gave the women a lot more authority, a lot more power.
Yeah.
And even when you got to Razor, Admiral Kane, completely different character from the Mission Galactica film from way back then. But don't listen to it from our point of view. We actually have one of the actresses who was there at the time with us on the show at the moment, Miss Tricia Helfer. How are you? Thank you. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Nice to be talking to you guys.
Tricia, you played one main character, but you had many variants to that. Was that confusing at times to remember who you actually were?
I didn't have trouble working out which one was which out of my characters, because to me they are different characters. So they looked the same or very similar. I mean, maybe different hairstyles, hair color, but their experiences, I can't say as a human being, but their experiences as a robot, or their life experience was different. And I sort of based it on how much interaction they had with humans and what that interaction had been. So if they had worked closely with the humans, like Caprica 6 and had actually fallen in love with Baltar, or if they were, they worked just on the base ship and had that much more, ideological, like humans are bad and then they would have a different reaction. And so that's sort of what I based them on and then fleshed them out from there.
So the show featured a lot of intense content, particularly a lot of violence, especially the way the number 6 character was treated on the Pegasus. At the time, did you think you were sort of ushering in a new age of adult TV shows, I guess, particularly given the types of shows that are being made now?
I wasn't aware at the time of necessarily that shows were going to get maybe a little bit more explicit, or the Pegasus episodes, I guess at the time they weren't explicit, but they were, they touched on issues and but I certainly wasn't predicting into the future, and I didn't think they were necessarily that extreme for the time period that we were in either. Maybe for being on television, possibly, but not in general. So I was just focused on what we were filming there, and I was more focused on bringing a PTSD element to my Gina character, which I thought was really interesting to play off of. We had discovered at that point that the Cylons had emotions and could feel. So I liked the idea of adding in like a PTSD type aspect to that character and what had been done to her. Just like animals can have trauma and PTSD and everything like that, I like the idea that the robots could as well. But I didn't look too much into the future of saying, oh, this is going to open up open it up for other shows to be able to be more, show more on television. No.
I remember when the show was first announced, it caused a bit of a stir around the fans. Do you recall experiencing any backlash from the supporters of the original show?
When we first came out at Comic-Con, the show had been filmed but hadn't aired yet, the miniseries. There was a lot of backlash, yes. Not so much for my character, because my character wasn't in the original show. So I was kind of just glanced over in terms of the initial discussions and the backlash. But things like, the fact that Starbuck was now a woman, and Boomer was also a woman too, but for some reason they didn't seem to care about that as much as the fact that Starbuck was a woman. Anytime there's, a beloved show and then it's changed, there's going to be some discussion about it. And I'm happy to say that I think most of the people that were unhappy to begin with, then ended up at some point watching the show and seeing it for what it was. And I think there were two different time periods, and that's the way I looked at it. Like, you couldn't have done our show when the original show aired. And then doing the original show in our time period, it would have been more camp, and it wouldn't have had the same kind of effect, I don't think, that our show did. So I think, our Ron Morris reimagining was also for a time period that it was in. And you can enjoy both versions of the show. And my character was, I was hated from the beginning of people that watched the show because I was the bad guy. So I remember my husband at the time telling me, I was like, everybody hates me. And they're like, no, they don't hate you, they hate your character, which means you're doing a good job because you're the bad guy. So I was like, oh, you're right. You're right. But my whole point was to show some of the Cylons' perspective and show the enemy's perspective a little bit. And I think some people started to have some sympathy for the Cylons.
Regarding Six's relationship with Baltar, do you think she was really in love with him?
I didn't know in the beginning if it was genuine love, but I do feel throughout the series and by the end of the series that yes, I think it was a genuine love between Baltar and Caprica 6. It gets muddled along the way with Head 6 having a lot more interaction in many ways, especially in the first and the second season with Baltar than Caprica 6, who ends up, she was, when she protected Baltar, then she was, she downloaded into a new body and then was on Caprica for a while and then was on the base ship for a while. And so she wasn't actually reunited with Baltar for quite some time. But I do think it was genuine love by their storyline throughout was. And I think they both didn't know it at the time in many ways. And I think it was something they realized later on.
How do you feel about how the legacy of the show has lived on after all these years?
It's been so exciting for me to see the legacy of Battlestar because it's actually seems to be as relevant today, and new audiences are finding it, or a lot of the people that I'm meeting, it's their, younger people that are coming up that they were too young to watch it at the time, but their parents watched it and now they're watching it. And I'm actually doing a rewatch myself and doing a podcast called Battlestar Galactica about a rewatch of the entire series. And what I'm finding is how relevant it is today. It's actually almost more relevant now than it was then. And so there's a whole new generation. There's people rewatching it, and then there's also a whole new generation of people watching it. And so I think it's a show that's going to, it stands the test of time over the last 15 years for sure. And at this point, the special effects and everything still hold up, the visual effects. And the story, of course, is so poignant that I think it's going to hold up for a little bit longer yet.
Well, that is absolutely truly fantastic, and we've certainly loved having you on the show. Sounds like you're actually busy there, so we're going to let you go. So thank you, Tricia, for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for having me on, and good luck with the show.
All right, that brings us actually to the end of the episode. Don't forget to subscribe to us if you haven't done so already. Click the bell for all the latest updates and reminders as to everything that's going on around the place. Next week, we're going to be talking about The Matrix turning 20 years old. So make sure you take the red pill and join us in the zone. Until then, bye for now.